Hello and welcome to the Beginning of Wisdom podcast. My guest in this episode has been my friend and mentor for 8 years. I first met him when he was interviewing me for the Year of Discipleship and Training with LL Ministries in 2018. Since that first conversation I had with him, I knew that he was a very kind and insightful man, and I've learnt a lot of wisdom from him over the years. It is my pleasure to have Michael Widderich with me on the podcast. So, Michael, it's good to have you on this podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here. It's exciting.
Awesome. Yeah. So I thought to start off with, I'd love to hear a little bit about where you've come from and where you grew up, because you didn't grow up here in Australia. You came from Germany. But at one stage along the way where God was leading you, it brought you to Sydney. So, yeah, I'd love to hear just a bit of a snapshot of your childhood and where you've come from. And then, yeah, we'll go from there.
Yeah, I think like you said, I grew up in Germany. Have two older siblings, two brothers, so family of five. And it's my mum is a Christian, my dad isn't, so it was also kind of a bit of a split household in that sense. Although my dad was happy kind of for my mum to do her thing and for us to to be taken to church as well during that time growing up. And I think that was kind of the home environment where I grew up in. That in Germany as well, going to school and kind of having a rough household with my brothers. Although we never really got into like massive fights. I can't recall real bad fallouts and where we wouldn't talk to each other. I think it was more like a nice kind of atmosphere at home where we'd get into the same things, and because we're only 2, 3, 4 years apart, so it's pretty tight, I would say. And even to this day, we're still kind of trying to connect, even though we're in different parts of the world. But yeah, growing up was I think mainly a positive experience for me. Our family was kind of a nurturing, safe place in many regards, not in all regards, but in many regards.
Yeah.
And so I feel quite fortunate and blessed to have grown up in that family in the area. And I think I was quite shy growing up. Not so much in the family. I think in the family I was fine, but stepping out of it, I was the youngest. So I recall often primary school, most parts of the high school, just being quite reserved and shy, and maybe not having the greatest image of myself in different ways. So, but I don't think I necessarily struggled. I tried to apply myself, and I mean, got into different things as a teenager as well, which probably made my life a bit harder at times. But yeah, I feel like in the midst of that, I always had an awareness of God growing up. So I would say we had a Christian household through my mum, and her family has a strong Christian kind of root. And she took us as well to like a Baptist church, which was my home church, I would say. That I think from small on, can't remember when I started going there, but that has been kind of a really consistent church life for me. Yeah, maybe not so much initially. Initially, it was more, we all had to go, but eventually, I think I formed my own kind of identity in that church. The more I got involved, kind of with worship and serving in different areas, and the more I formed my own friendships among people that were around the same age, that I think really drew me in. And it didn't. I think it initially was a bit of a chore, whereas then eventually it was like a real joy to kind of engage.
Yeah. So did you and your siblings go to church for most of your childhood then?
I would say so. Yeah. So we all went, and I think my oldest brother was really quite into it. My next oldest brother, uh, maybe 50-50 at times, and maybe still a little bit like that these days. And but I think we all kind of brought ourselves in different ways. Like my middle older brother is into more IT stuff and things, so he got into the tech area and got himself into that.
Yeah.
And we went on like youth camps and things, summer camps together, which probably were the highlight of the whole experience over the years. Yeah, those kind of very intentional kind of camps that you go away with, which I'm sure a lot of people can relate to those.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
So you mentioned that you got into a few things as a teenager that probably made your life a bit harder. Can you go into that a little bit? What sort of things were you into as a teenager?
I think the teenage years are just really tricky. Like I said, I wasn't super confident, and so I think in those teenage years, a lot of my identity was drawn actually from my peer group. I think so. I mean, I hate my family, but I kind of started to differentiate myself from my family.
Your peer group, were they mostly members from the church, or were they classmates from your school?
Yeah, it's more like classmates, and it's all mostly secular schools. So
Yeah.
people that grew up in my area and that I went to class with. And I think while some of them would probably say they're Christian, it's probably more like not a lived out Christianity. It's
Yeah.
probably more like a what's the term for that?
Like a cultural
A
Christianity?
cultural Christianity, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's lots of, especially in the Catholic and in the Protestant traditions, that those are two major state churches in Germany. You have a lot of traditions, you have a lot of ceremonies in different ways that kids have come up in. Not myself actually, but a lot of my friends, and so they would have gone through that and they would have experienced that. But it's still very cultural, I would say. Not many of them would have really kind of a heart for Jesus and to live intentionally in that way. Yeah.
Mm. Did you learn English as part of your education in Germany?
Yeah, English is the first foreign language you learn in school.
Yeah.
Um, and then you can choose other ones. But yeah, but it depends, how much you care about it and how much you pick it up. Like some of my mates, they've sat in the same classes and they didn't take much away. Others really excelled and picked up really well. I was probably somewhere in the middle, and then once I came out here, kind of that helped me to kind of build on that.
Did you find it easy to pick up English and to apply it anywhere? Like, were there any contexts in your immediate situation where you were speaking English?
In Germany,
Yeah.
uh, not really. I think the main area would have more been when you watch like maybe like shows
Right.
that one of my mates has kind of ripped off somewhere legally, and those shows or movies, then they would start being in English, either subtitles or you just watch it in English.
Yeah.
That's probably the main thing. I mean, these days I think there's more English words, little things seeping into German culture anyway. So you kind of use the same terms, but people understand now what it is, even though if they haven't learned English.
Yeah.
But at the same time, a lot of people can't speak English in Germany as well.
I find that quite fascinating because in Australia, I don't think we take learning other languages too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And so to have, um, to be learning a different language as part of your school that a lot of people would be picking up quite seriously, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, yeah. I also learned French, but I can't.
Can't remember.
I can't recall much of it.
Yeah.
So, but maybe back to your question that you asked about my teenage years. So, like I said, I was heavily drawn towards my friendship group and what are they doing, kind of wanting to belong. And like I said, I had a foundation with my family, and I had a relationship with God to some degree, but it wasn't a like a relationship that was alive. I would say it was maybe more that culture type taste of relationship.
Yeah.
And so my friendship group was really the main peer group. And in the teenage years, I think they got into a few things. I mean, I guess that's the time where a lot of guys at least get into porn and masturbation. So that was a big part, and I think there was a lot of shame attached to that.
Mm-hmm.
Even which I thought it interesting. Even with friends that weren't Christian, like a Muslim friend, and he wasn't so much into Islam either, but he also expressed shame about it, which
Well,
like even though there's not that link to a certain belief system necessarily.
yeah.
So that was one big factor, and kind of what got into my life and stayed with my life for a while at that point. The other thing was there's a big kind of culture of alcoholism and drinking, initially beer, but then other things as well. And so I think I got into that probably as well quite early, like 14 or 15. I reckon 15, 16, those were the years probably that I drank the most in my teenage years. I guess when you kind of want to fit in, you want to be cool, you want to prove yourself, but you also kind of learn your limits.
Yeah.
So those were two pretty big influences, I would say. The other thing was probably gaming. Like a lot of my friends were into gaming, and that took up a lot of kind of hours in the day other than school.
So did your parents know that you were drinking a lot in those years? Or did you kind of keep that a bit of a secret?
Well, they knew that we were maybe drinking a bit at friends' places or when we were going to town.
Yeah.
But I think that they wouldn't have known the extent of it. I remember, I mean, we had curfews at different times, in like, they became a bit later and later the older we got. But I often remember trying to sneak in the night or going, my dad would often stay up late to just do some work. And I remember often trying to sneak past his office to get to my bedroom. Not so much like because of the time, it was more if I knew that I had drunk a lot and I was heavily intoxicated. I just did not want to start a conversation with him because that would have been super, super obvious that how
Yeah.
much I would have had. But I think my mum was more living a bit in denial. Like she would always tell herself, "Oh yeah, they had one or two drinks or something,
Right.
but it's okay." But yeah, I think she didn't want to know really
Yeah.
how much she would have drunk. Yeah.
So as you became more a young adult, did these things continue on? Like, where did you begin to cultivate a bit more of a relationship with God and take following Jesus more seriously for yourself?
Yeah, so I think, like I said, when I became more involved in church, that really helped
Yeah.
because then with those friendship groups, they were a bit more like-minded. In my initial in my other friendship group, I always felt very self-conscious. There was also a lot of fun being made of people, and with me, it was being a Christian and all the silly things that I believe, and how I live my life. Whereas with those friends at church, they were a really good influence, and we were able to worship together and serve a purpose together.
Yeah.
And so we had about 3 or 4 summer camps that really were significant to me. But I think it was about when I was 17 that we went away for a week to a summer camp. And those times, because you're so shut off from the rest of your world,
Yeah.
there are really times when you become very reflective, or that's how I felt. Um, and there was a time when I really it became like I very much was convicted about, like, I want to make this faith my own. Like I don't just want to piggyback on my mum or my brothers. I wanna make that decision to myself that I've tasted throughout the teenage years, that type of lifestyle, like with my friends. Like I don't really want that to be my life, and so I wanna make a call to accept Jesus in my heart and to be more serious about that. And I think initially, maybe I can talk about that with the baptism. I got baptized a year later because I felt like once, because a baptism is the public declaration to everybody that yes, I am a Christian. And I knew that even though I gave my life to Christ maybe the year before officially, that I wouldn't be perfect straight away, but I felt like, no, I have to sort my life out first before I then get baptized.
Right.
Because once I declare publicly, I'll be held accountable, especially by my friends. And so, I have to get things in order.
Were you planning to get baptized pretty much from the moment you gave your life to Jesus? Or did that grow as a bit of a next step for you as time went on?
Yeah, I don't think, yeah, funny enough, even though I went to a Baptist church, it wasn't really okay, so this summer camp, you gave your life to Jesus, now let's get baptized. Yeah, there wasn't any leading or pressure towards it. And even when I did get baptized, it wasn't an intentional step. My cousin got baptized on that day, and a couple of other people. And initially, I would have just attended, and it was just the week leading up to it that I had a chat with my pastor about it, and I talked about my reservations and my things, and he just said, like, you don't have to be perfect, mate. Like, just, like, you've accepted Christ. He'll continue to grow you, and this is just to seal it and to celebrate with your community of faith. So yeah, I just felt like in that week that a lot of had shifted in my heart. It was like, yeah, I actually want to do that, and that was not long before I came out to Australia as well. So I thought actually that would be quite significant for me to do that before I go.
So, what were some of the events that led to you moving to Australia?
So I finished, in my last year of school, one of my good mates, he heard about the work out here in Australia,
Yep.
and he was keen to come, but he didn't quite want to go by himself. And initially, I I had different options. I wanted to initially study, then I wanted to do more like a gap year in Germany, and then eventually it turned out into, okay, let's do a gap year here out in Australia. And so we kind of were planning for that, but kind of last minute, the last 2 3 weeks before we were meant to come, he kind of chickened out. So he was like, oh, so again, because I guess the ministry is quite Christian focused and very intentional, and that didn't line up with kind of his lifestyle, and he just had doubts. So he decided, I'll just start uni, it's fine. But he left me to my own kind of devices. But I was still keen, and I thought, it's fine. So yeah, kind of went in the plane and came across. That was in 2011,
Yeah.
and I think, I was 19 at the time.
What did your parents think of you going to Australia to do a year of discipleship?
Well, I think that my mum has traveled a lot when she was younger. Um, so I think she thought it was a good thing. And obviously she's a Christian, so it's a Christian program. So she would have approved of that back in the day. My dad was, I think, always has had the attitude of, as long as us brothers would kind of pursue something that we're passionate about, and not just laze around at home or kind of be purposeless.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of um, his main aspirations for us, and I think that was fine. So my mum was fine with that initial year, but I think education is quite important for her,
Yeah.
and so as I was then staying on and kind of continue the work, I think she got a bit kind of frantic about, no, you have to start studying.
Right.
So yeah, that was interesting.
So she would have seen it as a bit of a gap year for you.
Yeah, and that's what it
Yeah.
was framed. Yeah, it was framed as a gap year here, like work and holiday.
Yeah.
So you kind of work a bit, you volunteer, you kind of travel. Yeah.
So what was it like when you arrived to LL Ministries in Sydney?
Oh, it was, yeah, very different climate. So
Yeah.
I was kind of hit with that in the face straight away. But
Because it starts in summer here, doesn't it?
well, I came out in September actually. So
Okay.
I didn't line up with any of their specific programs necessarily. I was
Yeah.
just volunteering.
Okay.
So yeah, so that was not, but it's a end of German summer.
Yeah.
And kind of just coming out of winter here. So I love the countryside here, and kind of coming into that community, getting to know people. I remember there's one guy that was on team, like a true Aussie, very kind of thick slang. And he kind of was talked to me in the first few weeks about different things and just being friendly. And I was like, I have no idea what you're saying. I have no idea. Like, I can't understand you. Yes, I had English in school, but I have no idea what you said.
Yeah.
So I think uh, there's quite a bit in the Aussie language that you have to get used to.
Did you find that challenging and a little bit of a barrier at first?
Yeah, I think other than with him, I didn't really have an issue with other people. I mean, I had to do a lot of catch up the first 6 months, I think. But then I was pretty comfortable. I think another thing that stood out to me in that first few months is, like I said, I grew up in a Baptist church, and it's very kind of solid teaching, very Bible based teaching, very much I would say centered around, if you look at the Trinity, very much centered around Jesus as the Savior. Not so much God the Father, maybe a little bit, but then nothing about the Holy Spirit. So
Yeah.
I think I soon became aware of my limited understanding of the Trinity, through the teaching and all the work that's gone on at LL, and being really challenged by it. Like, being really challenged by a lot of the factors, and it's like, wow, do I really believe this? Like, is this in the Bible? Yes, this is the Bible. Why haven't I really heard about this, or read it in a more kind of serious way? It's kind of, scriptures about the Holy Spirit that just kind of fall by the wayside when I was growing up. That now kind of came a bit more alive, and yeah, so there was a lot of wrestling in those first few months about what do I actually believe, like. And I think the other part that was massive was just what they encouraged was two-way journaling, and what they encouraged building a relationship with not just Jesus but God the Father, and not just praying in a sense. I always prayed just my own prayers to God,
Yeah.
but now encourage a conversation with God, where it's maybe me responding to God, or starting something off, and then trying to sense, what do I feel like he's responding to me in that,
Yeah.
which was very new to me. So, and with two-way journaling, which is kind of, just writing to God, so it's kind of praying really, but you're just journaling.
Yeah.
And I find it very helpful to hear or sense kind of what he's kind of directing me to, or what he's saying about me or other people.
So all this new teaching on God the Father and the Holy Spirit, what would you say that added to your understanding of God or of your Christian faith?
Well, I think it made it larger. Like, maybe some of the problems I had in Germany was more that I knew it was real, but I felt like I couldn't quite grasp it. Like, it was still a bit of there wasn't enough meat and enough depth to it that I could really live it out properly. And it felt a bit more like I was more kind of, it was up to me.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas I guess coming out to LL and with the teaching helped me to realize, like, there is a relationship aspect, like it is a relationship
Yeah.
with God, and I guess having a father aspect as well. Like, it's not just God, it's I these days relate most to God the Father, and I feel like, it's a very different way of looking at God, rather than just focusing on Jesus as more like a brother and a helper, or I guess a helper is the Holy Spirit, but more as
The person who came and died for you and saved you 2,000
that's
years
right,
ago.
yeah. Whereas the father, I think, like my dad, like, he was a great dad, but he was very emotionally absent, and didn't really engage much emotionally.
Yeah.
So, like, he was a great provider and like a doctor, so he was busy at times, but he also made times for us, and we generally shared meals together. But I feel like that emotional connection was very weak. Also with my mum, a bit stronger with my mum, but with my dad, it was pretty absent. So I felt like there was a longing in me to have like a strong emotional connection with people, and knowing how to do that, knowing how to discern my own emotions, and like, just that intelligence. But then, like, I think there was a lot of wrestling around with my own dad and who he was and what he could offer and what he couldn't offer, and for me to not project all these things onto God as the Father,
Yeah.
to not kind of just see God as the Father as the same, and just kind of write him off in those same areas that I kind of had my dad off. So there was a real journey of learning who God is as the Father, what his desires are for me, how he sees me, and to allow him, I guess, to come into those spaces in my life where I was maybe a bit guarded or a bit unaware as well, for him to actually bring awareness. So that was quite huge. Yeah.
Yeah. Coming from a background where you have parents, and especially your father, who was maybe not so emotionally connected with you, and then hearing about how God is interested in you and wants to connect with you on an intimate and an emotional level. And he wants to draw out how you're feeling and how your heart is going, like the condition of your soul. How do you get from that view that maybe God isn't so interested into being able to relate with God as that father? What are some of the, I guess, the basic concepts that you were able to be picking up through the ministry that they were able to teach you to help you with things like two-way journaling, where you're speaking to God, you're writing it down, and then you're in a position to sense and to be confident enough that God might be speaking to you in order to like write down what you feel him saying?
I think you have to just be immersed in that for a little while. Like, it doesn't change very quickly.
Yeah.
Like with anything, like you just need to give it time and really wrestle with it. I think you can't just put it at arm's length or just pretend, yes, yes, I've taken it on, when you haven't really. Like, you have to really wrestle it. I think when it comes to, for example, the two-way journaling, which has been really helpful for me and still is, initially there was a lot of, as we were taught and as we kind of continued like to do it week by week, in the early months, there was a bit of a imposter feeling, like in terms of, oh, I'm just writing this as if it's God, but it's not really God. Like, is it really God? And so we also got taught a little bit how to discern God's voice in that,
Yeah.
whether it's journaling or whether it's through worship or whether it's maybe through desires or emotions. So that really helped us to be able to pick it apart a little bit and to feel like, yeah, this is really God. I think sometimes when it's a very different stream of thought that I would normally have, when it's very different to what I would normally think, there've been times where it really was like, yeah, this is so you, God.
Yeah.
But at the start, I think I had to consciously make that choice that actually, I've dedicated this time to God, this time in the morning or whatever. Like, I've invited God into that. So now I believe that he's in it. I believe that he's in these pages. And I think what helped as well is that the Bible became a bit more alive for me as well. Like, the scriptures now kind of, God spoke through the scriptures a bit more than he had previously. And kind of, and we again had activities where we included the scriptures in our prayers. So I think that helped as well.
Yeah.
Just kind of to have it really see how it lines up with the Bible.
I don't know if you found the same thing, but I also found that when I was there, because the team and the staff are living and breathing a relationship with God, it became easier to kind of, by osmosis, kind of get that same faith that God was really quite intimately involved in every detail of my life. And that really helped me to grow an understanding of the fact that God is very interested in connecting with me.
Mm-hmm.
And that when I come to journal and to really, I guess, document a conversation that you might have with God that is not easy to have in your head or out loud with him, it kind of became an extension of the faith that God is walking with you every day. And so I really found that being in a community that just seemed to take it for granted almost, that this is the God that we're following.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that modeling is a huge aspect. Yeah, I agree. It's like, I think the environment that you put yourselves in makes a huge difference to who you become.
Yeah.
So, and I think the Bible talks about that, doesn't it?
Yeah, I
Like, be
think there's
careful who
a
you hang out
proverb.
with, like paraphrased. Be careful who you hang out with because you become who they are. So,
Yeah.
and I think that's certainly true with that environment. But it wasn't, I think for me, it wasn't just the modeling. It wasn't just the seeing other people live intentionally in that way, and the routine as well. I think, like for example, having a time of morning devotions like nearly every day, I think that really helped me to kind of cement it in over time. Because I feel like we often really are creatures of habit, and habit kind of works well for us. But so on top of the modeling, I would say it was also the way that uh, I was invested into personally. So there was a bunch of older guys on the team who every now and then, for example, would go away on a camping trip or something like that. And those times were quite significant as well, because it was just the men. So there were a bunch of kind of older alpha guys, and then me and maybe some of the other like students.
Yeah.
And it was a time of fun, of hanging out, of laughing, and um, doing activities that were really joyful. But then there were also times of intentional connection with each other, and maybe where they would share stuff about their life that like bring us into some of their experiences, and they were quite significant moments where you feel like, gosh, like you have their attention now, and they you can ask them any question, and where they share about quite vulnerable things in their lives that they've gone through, or some quite painful. um and so I've found that really yeah, it really impacted me in terms of, okay, this, like, because my dad didn't do much of that.
Yeah.
I still remember every time I would ask my dad about something in his past, about school, about work, maybe a bit more in the recent years, but any personal things, he would always say like, "Oh, I don't have any recollection of that. Like, oh, I can't really remember." And he doesn't have, in those relational areas, he doesn't have any firm opinions. He can be quite stubborn and really opinionated in other areas, but he didn't give much in those areas that I really cared about. And so to now be surrounded by a bunch of men who are quite intentional and who want to invest into me was really quite powerful. And I think that culminated really in the times when down the track, I started to get engaged and then married, and then later having kids. Still that type of group kind of helped me to approach those things in a really healthy and positive way.
And so having that input by those older men, and for them to show an interest in you and an interest in some of those parts of life that were previously shut out to you a little bit, you're saying that helped your view of God and how he was interested and invested in you as a person as well.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I think it helped me to realize, okay, they there's a difference out there. Like it doesn't, not every man is like my dad, which I kind of knew, but I think as I received the teaching about who God really is, and his intention for me and his love for me, and that he has a plan for my life, and that he wants that relationship with me. Like, it's one thing to receive the teaching, but then to have that also modeled and experienced, that other people investing into me,
Yeah.
that I think really helped to kind of bring those two together, and to start kind of making that shift of, okay, yeah, God, like you really do care about me. You really do love me. You really want me to have a sense of belonging in your family, and like I don't have to let me carry a sense of insignificance or worthlessness, which has been a little influence in my life, like over times, a little bits here and there. Like, I don't have to actually carry that around, because I do belong. Like, I don't have to earn it. Like, I don't have to work hard for it. I can just like be with him.
Yeah.
So that was quite significant.
After volunteering for a while, what led you eventually to stay on for longer than just a year?
I think there were a couple of factors. I really loved the work that the ministry was doing. Back in Germany, I was thinking to go into medicine, but that would have been a long path. And I loved the human body. I loved healing. I loved being with people and working with people. So there were a lot of factors in that. And at LL, I feel like a lot of those factors were reflected just slightly differently. It wasn't so much a focus on the body, but more like the soul and the spirit, and just what I had experienced personally, and a real shift in my heart, and really also in that first year, really breaking free from some of those urges and those desires, to really feel like a newfound freedom in me. I had a real desire to pass it on and to push into that more myself, but then also to help other guys and other people in that field. And so it was towards the end of my year that I had a chat with the leaders, and they were in the process of developing a program that is a bit more intentional, where they don't just have young guys come in and just help out and serve a bit and have a little bit of input, but they wanted to build a deliberate program. And so we talked about, what would that look like, and if I wanted to be part of that, if I wanted to help facilitate that space. And that really excited me, I think, for two ways. One was that I had that desire in my own heart that I wanted to stay in this environment and I want to contribute to it. But I think it was a real vote of confidence as well, that the guys there saw something in me that they felt like was weighty enough to kind of invite me into that.
Yeah.
So they've seen maybe a growth in me and a maturing, that I could step into more a facilitating role, slowly, but bit by bit. But yeah, so that was quite significant. The other part was that during that second half of the year of my year in Australia, I did a bit of traveling, and I also then got to know a lovely Aussie girl, and who's now my wife. And so she was just volunteering at the time as well, living in Perth at that point, but coming over to volunteer, and we kind of got along really well together, built quite a good friendship, and then kind of more and more kind of connected over the months, to the point where at the end of my year, we were wrestling with that tension of like, do we want to start going out?
Yeah.
And so I really had to kind of wrestle with, do I want to start dating somebody that lives on the other side of the world? Or do I just go back to Germany and go on with my life and, get into other things?
Wow. So that would have been a real crossroad for you, because not only had you found something for your heart in the relationship with God, and being able to contribute to a community and give something to others, but you were also interested in someone who eventually did become your wife. And so what a difference it would have been for you to have chosen to go back to Germany and just kind of leave everything else behind.
Well, I did actually.
You did?
We had a time, like a week's period, where we said, okay, let's not contact each other. Let's just, pray about it and bring it before God and see where he leads us. So
Okay.
we did, we kind of put it all down. And in that time, I felt like I didn't get anything from God, not a word. And I was starting to freak out. And it's like, okay, well, if it's not a clear yes from God, like, I'm gonna drop it and that's it. And so I said to her, no, we're not. Oh, I don't want to do it. Like, I didn't hear anything, and she was very taken back by that, because from her end, she thought it was like it would have been a done deal, and she kind of felt led that way. And
Wow.
then to kind of hear me say no, really, it was quite a painful time for her.
Yeah.
And we still had a few months at that point, but we certainly weren't talking much after that. And it was only in the months leading, kind of after that, that I allowed myself to revisit that. I still kind of had feelings for her, and we did see each other a couple of times throughout that time, and yeah, I feel like the feelings became stronger for her, and I really pushed into that kind of question again.
Yeah.
God, what's going on here? And I feel like there was a significant moment again in my journey with God where I had to learn to live with a different mentality. I think before that, I was very much locked into, like I need to hear from God. I need to hear very clearly about things. Yes, no. And I
Right.
mean, that was a pretty significant decision as well.
Yeah.
So fair enough. But I think what God was saying at around that time was that He wanted to empower me as a son to kind of make a decision. You have me at the center of your heart. That's Him speaking now. You have me at the center of your heart. You're living a lifestyle that I'm pleased with. And now, regarding this decision,
Hmm.
I want you to take that decision. And that
Wow.
was, yeah, that was quite big.
Yeah.
Which again can be quite scary again, because like, oh, what if I make the wrong decision? Like before that, it was more like, well, God said nothing, so that's fine. Or even if God says something, even if He says yes or no, if He says yes and it falls apart, you can still blame God.
Yeah.
but now it was up to me,
Wow.
and but yeah, I felt quite strongly to pursue Christy, my wife,
Yeah.
and that was a bit of a rebuilding process there, because she had, couldn't really trust me at that point. But
Yeah.
eventually we kind of worked through that and started a relationship.
Wow. Beautiful. So did you stay in Australia once you had decided, yeah, we want to pursue a relationship?
Yeah. So when the year came to an end, that's pretty much when we started the relationship. And really, that first year of our relationship was kind of distant relationship. So I was most of the time either in Germany or here in Sydney, where she was in Perth.
Yeah.
So it was a really kind of hard time to maintain that, and we had to be very intentional about that. But we had both like a quiet confidence about, this is really what we want, and we're committed to that. Um, so when I finished, I did go back to Germany because my visa ran out. I was just back for, I think, like 4 or 5 months, just working, getting a job, knowing that let's earn a bit of money to then finance my way back. And that just gave me again that taste of being back in my old environment, and wrestling with some of the things, that is so easy to just, here in Sydney you're very separate. I'm out of my all the stuff in Germany, but coming back into that environment, you have to reconcile things. You have to again kind of fight for what God has done in you, and so that was a good kind of time back in Germany. But eventually, then I got on what was called a religious workers visa. It was sponsored by the organization to come back, and so that's how I came back then in early 2013.
You came back to begin a bit of a program for young people to intentionally provide them a year for them to be discipled and trained, um, alongside what the ministry is doing to
Mm.
provide teaching and prayer ministry to others. So, how long was it before you were starting to uh, mentor and to disciple these young people coming in?
I think in my first year, it was more coming alongside some of the leaders as they're mentoring, and I personally received mentoring myself, and well, what was throughout. But so it was more like a coming alongside kind of approach initially, to kind of just pick up the skills and the nuances, and see different styles as well, because different people have different styles. So yeah, it was very much in a learning kind of capacity initially, even though I was, doing stuff with the young adults, and I had chats with them as well. But yeah, so learning for a year, I would say, and then more and more stepping out into the one-on-one space with them.
Yeah. What are some of the things that you've learned and that God has taught you being a mentor to younger men?
I think one of the most significant lessons I learned is that when you start a journey with somebody, and you work through stuff in their lives, and they start looking at things in their lives they haven't really looked before, and it goes quite deep. That there's a lot of pain that can come up. There's a lot of turmoil, a lot of wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
But in my head, I think when I first started, I just had kind of that picture in my mind that once you come alongside and work with somebody, like it's just improvement from there. Like it's just gonna get better.
Yeah.
But my experience was more that as people allowed themselves to get in touch with things in their lives that they've tried to maybe block out or ignore, or then there's a real wrestling going on, and they for a season can be in a more difficult state than the state that they came in. And I think I experienced that a little bit in my year, in my own journey, but I saw it more extreme, I guess, especially with people that just had a much harder upbringing. So and those times, I think it was really hard for me to reconcile it, to be like, what's going on? Like, why do they seem to be in a worse place now after 6 months than when they came? Like, when they came, they maybe were over here, and now they're all of a sudden dipped into that valley. And learning just that that's okay. That's actually where they need to be. That's the journey they have to take.
Yeah.
And I as a mentor don't have to take that on as a failure. I don't have
Right.
to think that it's my fault that they're now in a worse place, because I feel like that's a little bit what I did at the time. So I had to come to terms with, I'm just a vessel. God is just using me in this relationship with them. And if they have to go down, then I'll just make sure that I'm alongside them. But it doesn't reflect on who I am or what I've done in that sense.
Yeah. What are some of the other things that you've learned? Maybe some of the other challenges of being a mentor to young men?
I think obviously, everybody has free will choice.
Yeah.
And I think as a mentor, you can sometimes have this really ideal picture of, where you take people, and, you might have think about who they are and where they've come from, and maybe what are their strengths, what are their deficiencies, and where's God in the midst of that. And you might have kind of a picture ahead for them, like what their life looks like or what they need to do to get there.
Yeah.
And yet we all know that our human condition, our human nature, is filled with resistance.
Yeah.
Filled with just wanting comfort, wanting the easy life, wanting not wanting to face things. So I think, yeah, a big part has been, for a lot of the students, but particularly some, that there was just so much resistance to making progress. Whether that was, yeah, maybe more on an emotional level, or whether that was in the study component. We had a study component where they did maybe a Cert 4 or a diploma.
Yeah.
And where they just really struggled with it. And, I felt like I invested in them and taught skills in different areas. And yet they were still, coming late to meetings, or submitting things late, or yeah, just not really doing the homework that's been required of them. Maybe to work on maybe their internal frameworks or their emotional stuff. And yeah, kind of these were challenging times, I would say, where you see so much future, like such a bright future and so much potential, and yet you have to go with their pace. Like, you can only go with them where they're willing to go, and
Yeah.
you just have to embrace them where they're at.
And what are some of the moments that you have found really rewarding, being able to walk alongside these people?
I think there's it's quite I think it's quite a privilege to walk with somebody over a certain time frame. For us, it was a year or a 2 year time frame, and you
Yeah.
really get to know people. You really hear things about their lives that they might not even have shared with many other people or with anybody at all.
Yeah.
So I think that's quite a privilege, like to be so intimately involved in somebody's life and help them to direct them and help them connect with God. Sometimes you feel like people haven't changed much. Other times you see a significant change. But I think the real test is over time. And that's why actually listening to your earlier podcast with the guys, I love how they lay out now not just the time they had maybe at LL or in a specific place, but how over the years, kind of God has continually walked them through. And so I'm really encouraged by that. I'm really that brings me joy to see the fruit of maybe the seeds that I've sown back then, how that has outworked itself. And so it's really, yeah, I think it can be a tough task because you can't see results straight away. You can't see results every week.
Yeah.
So, but over time, I think God is doing a work in people's lives that, if you keep tracking with them, like it can be amazing to see.
As you've noticed these troughs and these valleys and these mountaintop times for the people you're mentoring, have you found that you've gone through those times yourself? And what was the relationship between giving of yourself and also wanting to maybe take a step back and focus on your own heart?
Mm. Yeah, I think that definitely has happened, and I think if you stay somewhere for several years, like you naturally go through those stages as well. And I think in those times, I think it's just important for me to discern, like, is it like, why are these things going on right now? Is it because there's areas of myself that I need to have a closer look at, which have been at times just like, wow, okay, like I thought I was fine, with my mum or something, or with female authority figures or with things like that, and yet like in a certain year it really gets poked,
Yeah.
especially when I did. I think that came up throughout several years, um, or in the way that I lead and my style of leading. I think initially I was quite non-confrontational. I
Yeah.
really had to learn to not let people get away with things too much and to tighten things up, and that took a lot. And it took a few years, like to really step into that space and not just be a pushover, which I feel like I've been growing up like for several years,
Yeah.
to really kind of again build that confidence. But there, yeah, many times when I feel like I wasn't walking in that, or times where there was just emotional stuff coming up and just needing to feel like, is that God, is that you slowly kind of indicating that maybe there's a change coming,
Mm-hmm.
and you just prepare my heart for that, or is it more that there's some hurt that I need to acknowledge and to work through? I think over the years also, my role was predominantly the same. So there's also a bit of like little changes here and there, but also a bit of sense of, yeah, kind of the repetitive nature of it getting a little bit boring, or also times when I just felt flat and I like, oh, I really don't have much to give. Particularly, I think when we started having children and having like young children,
Yeah.
and yeah, with especially with number two and then number three coming, so they were all 3 under 5. That I think that took a lot from me, a lot of late, like up during the nights, a lot of caretaking, a lot of investing into my own children. Yeah, that I felt like I couldn't really give all of myself to the students, to the work, and I had to wrestle with that, like how much, how how little is too little to actually invest into the work. I had to measure my passion levels, like am I still really passionate about this or not? And then towards the end there was a transition of, I still really believed in the work. I still really loved the target group, young adults. I still was passionate about it in general, but for that particular role, kind of my passion had kind of slowly decreased,
Mm-hmm.
and there was more something else that God was birthing in me to kind of look into the future. Yeah.
So what was that you were starting to get more of an interest in after you'd done this mentoring and this leading role with young adults?
So it took a little while. I think there was a period where I felt a bit lost because I knew something else was coming or is going to come, and I wasn't quite sure yet what it was. So it took a while to identify that. So counseling is really something else I wanted to step into. And I think the reason for that is that I loved what I loved about the program that I was helping facilitate at LL was that you were journeying with people and you were caring for them. You were helping them spiritually, emotionally to walk with God, and there were also courses where we offered to any adults to come in to do that. I wanted to have maybe more specific training into that, so I did a degree in a bachelor's degree to to just learn those intrinsic kind of interactive skills,
Yeah.
communicational skills, relational skills, and to have a bit more of a framework in terms of techniques that can be used.
Having done a degree in counseling and having come from, I suppose, counseling and mentoring young people, have you discovered a little bit more of a specific age group or demographic that you're passionate about in your counseling? Or was it more about just broadening to uh, many more people in being able to walk with them?
I think I am probably most passionate about young adults. I really love that demographic because that's, I feel like when people become more their own individuals.
Yeah.
So, the kids, grow up to just step into adulthood, leave the home, start studying, start work, and start families eventually. So I think there's so much happening in that season. Let's say 18 to 25 to 30. So much change that there's a lot to work with. But also, I think people are very open towards mentoring and open towards having somebody come alongside, and they're very moldable.
Hmm.
So I think that's why I really love that stage. But having said that, I love to come alongside anybody,
Hmm.
and I think as in the adult range, you can use a lot of the same techniques. Whereas, like, there's you do change things up, but the only difference is really if you work with kids, like with young 6 to 15. That's very different, I think, or 4 to 15 or whatever it is. So that's what I realized in the counseling space. Like, yeah, okay, so those things were very different just because of our cognitive and emotional development is very limited at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah, young adults is kind of still what I'm really passionate about. But also, and I probably have a bit of a heart for women specifically as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm not sure why that is necessarily. Maybe because they already carry a sense of emotional awareness and are more willing to be vulnerable and to go into places. But yeah, I don't know.
So another thing that I really observed and I admired about you when I came along and did a year of discipleship and training at LL Ministries was that you were walking quite closely with a group of other guys that were similar age, yourself and two other men. And as I understand, you're still walking very closely with them and you've formed a bit of a close knit friendship group with them where you've met up regularly and intentionally talked about some of the real challenges and some of the more intimate details of your life. And I really admired that kind of band of brothers that you had. And eventually, I formed a group of guys that were kind of journeying alongside me as well. Yeah, tell me a little bit about how that formed and what you've gained in your own growth and your own relationship with God to have other guys that are willing to be very vulnerable and very real with you and who can journey with you alongside some of the bigger life seasons like marriage and raising children. Yeah, what has that added to your life as you've journeyed with them?
Yeah, I think it's actually 2018. I think we just started being intentional in that way the year before that. So it's been 8 9 years now that we've done that, and it's it's interesting because you think about small groups or connect groups or ways of continually have connection with people. And I feel like sometimes God has seasons. In fact, for most things, I think, when you're in relationship with people, it's for a certain season, for a certain time.
Mm.
Yes, family is a bit different, but outside of family, a lot of the relationships are in season. And so with this one, I think it's just a couple of guys and myself who felt very, very like-hearted in who we are and what we want to pursue, what our focus is in life, what's important to us. And I think what we really wanted is more intentionality in pursuing friendship, in growing in God together, um, in maybe keeping each other accountable, praying for one another, kind of being with each other in the real joyful moments and being with each other in the real painful moments. So it's a lot of that. Not sure if we necessarily kind of worded it that way or would have articulated that at the time, but I think that was our desire. But it's been really interesting to see the development over the years. I think when we first started it, we were quite idealistic about it. We thought it had to look a certain way. So we've tried quite a few things. We tried picking a book and reading the book and discussing it, picking even maybe chapters in the Bible. We tried having being very intentional about prayer ministry, and where we had just seasons where we really focused on things.
Yeah.
And I think there have been some of them have been really good. Some of them kind of was clear pretty early on, like after a month or two, it's like, okay, that's not sustainable, or this doesn't quite work for us.
Yeah.
So we had to kind of identify that. Um, and I think what it's more matured into, I would say, in the last 4 or 5 years, is that we just had to adjust our expectations of what it is. We have been, I think, in terms of times, we have been pretty good meeting nearly weekly.
Wow.
So most years, yeah, maybe we missed 10 weeks in the year or something.
Yeah.
But we've been very intentional, and I think the weekly frame has helped us a lot to stay connected, to stay in our stories, to journey with each other. Like if it's fortnightly, and especially if you then miss one, it's like with connect groups, like there's quite a gap and there's a lot to catch up on.
Yeah.
But that weekly kind of check-in has been really good.
Mm.
And yeah, so it's more become now just a time where we share about like what has God done, how have we encountered God in that time, what's been going on in our families, in our marriages, in our relationships with our children, what's kind of gone on in the workplace, in relationships over there, or in opportunities. Are there choices that need to be made, and can we band together to pray about that?
Yeah.
Are people struggling in the family? Can we pray together for that? Is there maybe a sense that one of us is slacking off? And not necessarily in a sense of, oh, you're not reading your Bible every day, what's going on?
Yeah.
But more in like, hey, I've noticed as you've been sharing, like you just seem like you've just given up, or you seem like you don't really care much about it, yet your wife cares deeply about it. Like, what's going on here?
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And is this really the best decision for your family?
Yeah.
So it's more become, I think, more grounded in just life rather than trying to have a very narrow, specific focus.
Yeah.
It's just we've become very accustomed to trusting one another,
Mm-hmm.
to be open with one another, and to speak into each other's lives.
Yeah. Yeah, because at first you were able to meet in person because everybody lived in roughly the same area, but now one of the guys has moved into state. So how has that been transitioning to like an online space where you gather? Was there any kind of point where you thought maybe you might have to discontinue, or did that connection stay strong even though you're not now in the same community?
It's actually been interesting. So even when we were all still living in the area, we had times where we said we would just do it online, where it was just too hard to get out of the house. And that felt a bit odd initially. And I think the connection is different. You kind of feel like it's not as strong or authentic. And so when one of our mates decided to move across, it felt a bit like, is this the end of a season that we had? Is it just seasonal?
Mm.
And I think we had a break for a little bit once he moved over, and they had to settle in as a family. There was a lot going on, but then we started reconnecting, um, and that was quite fresh. It was new, and it felt like it took it to another level actually, because now it wasn't as convenient. Now we had to be more intentional, and now he was actually going through a lot that we were able to process together, and I think he realized that there was a real, like, that he really needed that. He really desired that, and he really he realized that he values it much more than he realized.
Right.
That it was a much more helpful connection, even than he realized. He knew it was very valuable, but it increased in value. The distance made it increase in value, I would say.
Yeah.
And the same for us. I think even though they've been there for 2 years now, I still feel like I have quite a strong connection with him, which I think is a real test, because I've had a lot of relationships that after physically separating, after being in a different vicinity, after a few months or even a couple of years, they just kind of fall through. Like, it's very hard
Yeah.
to keep up. Yet this one has stood the test of 2 years' time. So, it has been. Yeah, I think it has deepened our connection.
Yeah. That's really cool, because I suppose this is far more intentional and in depth than just a couple of friends getting together. Like, this has Jesus and a relationship with God at the center of that little band that you've gathered together. And so I think that could be a really encouraging aspect of your group journeying together, that even if you can't find people who are geographically in the same spot, it doesn't mean that it's impossible to journey with these men and to keep some kind of relationship going. Um, and because I think that's often a bit of a discouragement, and almost maybe sometimes a bit of an excuse for not keeping close relationships with people, that it might just be hard to find them in your particular church or in your community. But if you have been able to grow some kind of a connection at some point, maybe it's possible to rekindle that, or to at least keep it going if someone needs to move, or if you kind of drift apart. Yeah, it's not too late, and it's not impossible to kind of regrow a real connection with some guys around you. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think something I want to add is that we just learn we have to keep it very simple. Like, if we try to be too elaborate, too specific, and at times I probably had different desires for what it should be or what I needed. So we can still verbalize them, and maybe have seasons where we change it up a little bit. But I think simplicity is important. What I've particularly loved, actually, since we've moved it online, is that, so we normally try to do it 8 o'clock or something, one of the nights when most of the kids are in bed. The bedtime routine has been mostly finished.
Yeah.
But yet sometimes kids still come in, or we have to go back and be with one of the kids, and somebody's just turned the mic off, or maybe the mic is still on, but you kind of hear those cute interactions with kids. You sometimes have the wives come in and share a bit. Often one of us doing the dishes, one of us is still cooking.
Yeah.
With the time difference, or driving back from work. But it's those. What I really appreciate is that it's not a clean environment like this one, where we just sit, and it's very, very much for this purpose. yeah, actually, I feel like we're doing more life together now,
Yeah.
just because we see each other in those very natural, everyday environments,
Yeah.
interacting, um, and it feels very authentic.
Yeah. Yeah. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, you
Mm.
meet in each person's home at the
Yeah,
same time every time you meet
that's right.
online.
But in the home, as we do the normal activities that you would do in the home. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I found was a really good model for having a band of brothers with you is the example that Jesus had where he was journeying with his disciples, the 12 of them, but he seemed to also have like an inner circle with Peter, James, and John that he would often take on particular and like special meetings and interactions with them. And so, yeah, Jesus modeled this real inner circle that he had with just a few specific guys that was even more closely knit than the 12 disciples. And so when I was forming a band of brothers where I was asking one or two other guys to join as I kind of intentionally tried to walk with God and with community, I find that a really cool model to see that even Jesus, even though he was God, that human side of Jesus still needed to walk alongside these people, and he shared really intimate moments with them as well.
Mm,
So
that is
yeah,
quite special. Yeah. I think our heart only has so much of a capacity of deeper connection. And I
mm,
feel like that's kind of the sweet spot. Two or three people
yeah,
where we can go deeper, where everybody gets a voice.
mm,
Everybody's very much in the center.
yeah,
Whereas if you get bigger, then people seep out. I think one final comment in that is I don't want to necessarily give a picture as well where it's all always serious. It's
yeah,
always, you know, weighty. It's always like intense. I think like we have so many moments where we just crack up, we're just being stupid,
yeah,
where we're just I don't know being ourselves and having fun with each other.
yeah,
Whether it's just in conversation or whether in the past where we've intentionally had some activities to bring that in
yeah,
to lighten it. Like there were, especially in the early years, there were just times when it just felt so heavy, like just like a bit of a grind, really.
mm-hmm.
And so, especially in those times, we found like, okay, let's actually go bowling or let's do something together. That's fun,
Yeah,
where it doesn't always have to be like super serious.
yeah,
And
great,
so, and so now, obviously, we don't do activities together because we're separated physically. But I think the humor still lingers and often comes in. And yeah, I don't know,
yeah,
because we know each other so well, like we know what sets us off and
yeah,
kind of can make fun of each other in ways. Yeah.
yeah. There's a really good sense of familiarity with each other,
Mm,
and yeah, that's awesome.
mm.
We might wrap it up there, but thank you so much for coming and sharing some of your story and some of the things that you have done as you've come to Australia and joined LL Ministries, and then you've gone on to your other ambitions as a counselor. So thank you very much, Michael.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure being here. Thanks, Levi.